This is Doug Brown, and welcome to this episode of BarChat. My guest today is Diane Whitney. She's a partner in the law firm of Pullman and Comley, and she practices land use and environmental law. In 2015, she was the winner of the Connecticut Bar Association's Women in the Law Ladder Award, and she's chairman of the Board of Trustee of the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame. Our topic today is work-life balance. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, work-life balance is a great big topic. It means a lot of things to a lot of people. What does it mean to you, and what have you seen in your experience on the topic of work-life balance?
You know, it's an interesting question for me to contemplate, because for me it started the minute I started law school, because I went to law school late. I had 2 children in elementary school. So for me, the balance started as I started law school. And I made an initial mistake at that point, because I figured I could only do 2 things. I could only do law school and family. And I quit everything else I was involved in. And that was a mistake, because it became boring, it became oppressive. I felt unhappy. I needed something else to do.
You needed more than 2 dimensions in your life.
I mean, even if it was something as easy as knitting or quilting, I needed something else to do.
Something else to do.
So that's something that has to be part of a work-life balance, I think.
So, you know, one of the challenges with all the things the pressures that lawyers have, the pressure of their job, of their clients, of their community involvement, of their family, a lot of times lawyers can feel overwhelmed with that. What are some strategies that an individual lawyer can do when they feel like they're kind of drowning and they need to think about, I need to get better balance in my life?
You know, it's hard if you're already in a crisis mode, but that happens. I think if you can possibly step back and think through your priorities, what is important, and certainly your family is important and your job is important, and then how do you manage those things? As I've said to a number of people, if you have the right family and the right law firm, you've solved the problem right there. Mm-hmm. But not everybody does. But if you can involve your family in what you do, which sounds kind of backwards, but I think if your family understands what it is you do and its importance, that helps when you're not home for dinner all the time. They understand that you're doing something important. At the same time, of course, you try your best to be at their important things. Maybe it means a change of job in order for you to do that, which is hard right now because jobs are not as plentiful as they used to be.
Sure.
But if your family can understand what you do and how important it is, and also I think if we're talking about children now, you need to give children responsibilities. I think a lot of parents, particularly a lot of women, overcompensate. You have this pervasive guilt no matter where you are. Mm-hmm. And so when you're home, you try and do everything yourself, because if you were a good mother, you would do everything yourself. And that's not good for you, and it's not good for your children. Mm-hmm. We had a rule in our family that when you start 1st grade, you're old enough to make your own bed. They didn't look really terrific. And it's a little thing, but you start to build responsibility in your children. And they should continue to have an escalating level of responsibility.
So if you involve your family so they have some understanding of how what you're doing relates to the family's goals, and you give your kids some things to do, which is a great tip. What do you think, advice would you give to a lawyer who needs to be declining a client meeting in order to make a soccer game, and they're reluctant to say, I have to skip the meeting to go to a soccer game. So what advice do you have in that situation?
You know, not easy to do, and I've been practicing now for 30 years. 30 years ago, nobody would ever say that. And now I'm startled and amused and delighted when something will come up like that, and I will hear a young man say, well, Your Honor, I can't make that hearing date because I have to pick up my son from daycare. And I think, wow, things have changed in 30 years. It's not easy to rearrange a schedule, but I think very often it can be done. I mean, clients are people too, And sometimes I think we go out of our way when a unreasonable demand is made, which in my experience always happens on the eve of a major holiday. I think you can say, you know, I can't get that done on December 24th, but I can get it done by December 27th. Would that be okay? And a lot of times it is. Sometimes you have a real emergency and you have to drop everything and do it. But a lot of times we seem to escalate things into emergencies, and they aren't necessarily that.
So part of it is both with yourself and the other people in terms of setting boundaries, of knowing what you can do and what you can't do.
Yep.
We talked before and said one of the tips you had was getting people to learn to say no or to learn to say yes differently. Tell me about that.
Well, that's hard, and people who know me will laugh as I say this because I don't do it very well. After you've been practicing for any length of time, you're given some interesting opportunities. Would you serve on this board? Would you be a member of this committee? Something like that. And they will be very worthwhile things to do, both for you and for the profession. They'll be very interesting things to do, and you'll want to do them. And you have to slow down and say, I just can't do all these things at this time, particularly since most activities like that will involve extra meetings, they'll involve meetings at night, they'll intrude on your private time. I think the thing to keep in the back of your mind is, I can probably do that thing at some point, but maybe now is not the best time.
So maybe it's not no forever, maybe it's not right now.
Maybe it's, yeah, at a future time, ask me again.
Well, and one of the things that people can do when they get that commitment is to ask some questions back to the person asking in terms of how much time is involved and what is the expectation. I've seen a lot of young lawyers who will say yes to a commitment and then find out that they're on a track they didn't expect to be.
And another good thing is to say, gee, could I talk to somebody who's doing that now? So maybe the person who's asking you is not giving you the whole story. Somebody who is in fact on that committee or on that board can give you perhaps a more honest assessment of what's involved.
And one of the things I've seen about work-life balance is, you know, I guess originally it was this notion you should always be in balance, like every day should be in balance, but that's not really realistic, is it?
It certainly is not at all realistic. And many parts of the practice of law are what I call feast or famine, or this recurring phenomenon of the night before a major holiday, something falls apart. And at that point, you know, there's no question. You have to drop everything else and take care of that crisis. That's a case where if you've, in fact, prepared your family, they'll understand better what's going on.
And you say, look for the small opportunities to get people together that are easy. You mentioned something your family does.
Right. Our family has now a long-standing tradition of pizza on the patio. The idea was you want to get together with your friends, and just the thought of, I have to sit down and plan a dinner party, is not happening. So we started a number of easy celebrations. Pizza on the patio is one example. It is just that. It's outside, it's pizza, beer and wine, easy. But now we do it every year, about the same date, and all our friends expect it and look forward to it, and it's a good time. And it requires a minimum of effort, which is required.
So look for those low effort, high impact things like that.
The celebrations, don't lose track of, you know, don't eliminate the celebrations from your life. Just plan easy ones.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much for sharing your tips with us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.